Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is KIAN Jabbour and as usual I am your host this evening. With me as usual as well is Mr. Timothy Jonas. He is here. We have a multitude of topics we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to jump right into it because I know we don't have all night. One really good hour. So the first topic I'm going to bring up with you, well actually I have another interesting conversation. I don't know if you followed it at all, but it came out of Jamaica recently. I don't know if you heard about this big dancehall artist, Vybz Kartel, is now out of jail and freed after 13 years of back and forth saga. Have you looked at it at all? Have you?
I looked at it. I see people rehashing his old statement that he's never coming back to Guyana.
Yeah.
I thought that was peculiar. And one commentator, interesting you raised that, one commentator that I usually don't agree with, his response was, I hope that you're a man of your word. So I agreed with that entirely. I hope the man is a man of his word. He said he's not coming back to Guyana. Let's hope he keeps his word.
Why you don't want him to come to Guyana?
Because he said it.
Because strictly based on the fact that he said it.
Any public figure who shows that kind of disdain for this country doesn't need to come back here. Full stop.
Okay, I'm extremely conflicted here. I would love for Vybz Kartel to come to a concert here. I'm a very big fan. I do also appreciate your stance on this. Like you said, he has disrespected the country. He's disrespected all the people, and the fact of the matter is, be a man of the word.
Yes. Who is he? Who is he to make that kind of comment about Guyana?
About a whole country. Anybody else he would have torn to shreds.
A man who pretends to be rough cut, who we know is not rough cut, who was actually a bit scared when he came here and met some real rough cuts, and says he's not coming back. Well, good, stay where you are.
You know what? What an interesting opinion. For us younger folks, it's extremely conflicting. But I mean, I have to agree with you as a patriot, as somebody with some principle and some some decency. At the end of the day, you have, like I said, you've looked at the entire country and said, I got no time with y'all. I ain't got no interest in your money. I don't want nothing from you. And he disrespected us back then. Interesting.
You surprised me with that particular topic, though.
I know.
I hope I haven't offended any of your viewers, because I tend to take a hard line with that kind of thing. People mustn't speak rashly, especially when they... Who is he?
Yeah. He issues an apology and then maybe we'll consider it.
All right.
No, as a non-guy, and I guess he has. I mean, we watch how the country slaughtered that comedian, whatever his name is. You know who we're talking about.
Trinidad and pretend to be Trinidad.
Right. And the whole country's against him. We're done with you. But why not Vybz Kartel? I guess as influential, as a man as he is, he is much more influential, I guess, right now than any other musician, Caribbean-wise.
Okay.
Yeah, just you have no
I'm sorry, I'm not impressed.
No interest whatsoever. All right, we're going to move on to something a little bit more local. That was good. We're going to move on to something a little bit more local. We had... Like without fail, this country always has something new and exciting every week. But I think this particular situation has been something that's been brewing for quite some time now. It's the Chinese businesses, supermarkets, hardware stores, electrical stores, etc., that are popping up around the country. And obviously, anybody that doesn't realize that they're much more now than there were 5 years ago, and then even more so, if you ask me, more so on their way. You see a lot of construction happening for Chinese stores. You see a lot of businesses opening up. I mean, restaurants, etc. I'm going to bring up a video here just to start. This is a young man. I think his name is Omari Joseph, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's his last name. Nonetheless, he's not political at all. This is just a young man on TikTok. He has no affiliation to any political party. I just happened to come across his video. And it is a topic I spoke about last week, and I came across it this week. So I decided I'm going to play it for everyone to hear his perspective, and then I'm going to ask you to chime in on the matter. All right, so I'm going to ask Robbie, please go ahead.
Here's more proof that this isn't about competition. As promised, I went out in the streets. This time, let's bring it back to Georgetown. Guyanese shoppers who frequent Sheriff Street should be familiar with Nerva, Survival Supermarket, and DSL Cash and Carry. We can also throw Costco in there, but they're Trinidadian. Nonetheless, that's 4 supermarkets within a 1-mile stretch of road. A few months ago, a Chinese supermarket opened just 2 doors down from Survivor. Since then, 2 more are about to open on 4th Street, Camberville, and yet another is coming obliquely opposite Survivor on Sheriff Street. Apparently, not far from DSL, just up the roundabout, there's another one coming in Sobrianville. That brings in just a short space of time the grand total to about 8 supermarkets in that same 1-mile stretch of road. Where is the Central Housing and Planning Authority in all this? Do the zoning laws still apply? While this may be a commercial zone, something seems a little off here. If you look at where these new supermarkets are popping up, once again, it's clear that the intention is to surround local businesses and drive them out of business. If you can find a better explanation for this, please, by all means, leave it in the comments. Did all these businesses get land use clearances? Frankly, I doubt it, because I can vividly remember Survival Supermarket on both Sheriff Street and Vicington Road being forced to make additional arrangements to provide sufficient parking before they were allowed to expand or make any major modifications. It's also unlikely that all these businesses of the same type would be approved, especially so close to each other and without the knowledge of the existing businesses. It's even more unlikely that all of them would be approved at the same time, hence allowing them to start construction and open at similar times. Long story short, something's not adding up, and somebody or somebodies clearly aren't doing their work. You can apply this logic to different types of business. Imagine 5 hospitals in the same stretch of road without sufficient parking. Doesn't make much sense, does it? This is exactly the type of haphazard development our president spoke of when he was a minister in government. It makes me wonder if those in his government actually agree with anything he said back then. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to head over to YouTube for a more in-depth analysis of these issues. Link is in.
All right, we are back. Our Instagram viewers got a different conversation, but nonetheless, there you go. It's a very interesting topic of conversation. I mean, Tim, you've heard it before. He's basically explaining that there's not the Chinese are being for I guess, lack of a better understanding, a competitive advantage. I mean, for you to have 4 supermarkets there and then still allow another 4 supermarkets to be opening up there, I mean, the competitive advantage, I guess, will come in their business practices. Again, this is not about all Chinese businesses. I want to make that clear as well. But what they're explaining here is zoning and laws, and as far as creating a healthy business environment goes, why would they allow this? Why would this even be permitted? So what's your take on this entire scenario?
Well, this is what I know. Okay. First of all, that the Central Housing and Main City Council planning policies from the 1960s has zoning arrangements where in any specific zone, in any geographic area, they do not want to see more than a specific number of supermarkets or gas stations or whatever service oriented services are being offered. So when you apply for a license to operate a supermarket, one of the things that the authorities should look at is how much competition exists in that geographic area, so in the radius, and also how many supermarkets already exist there. You want fair competition, you want good competition, you want for there to be enough supermarkets, so that people have easy access and choices, but you don't want them starving each other either. That's not happening. We are seeing new supermarkets blossoming right next to existing supermarkets, and that automatically creates a problem, because what it tells you is that somebody has the financial wherewithal to put up a new building, to deck out his building, to buy stock, because it's not a little bit of stock to start a supermarket, and still to compete effectively against an already established supermarket there. And that must raise questions. Kian, I'll tell you, I know that a lot of your viewers are going to criticize you for focusing on saying Chinese supermarkets. But the truth is, there are no Hungarian or Icelandic supermarkets going on. There's no Ghanaian or Russian supermarkets. Most of them you will see are Chinese supermarkets. And the question got to be asked, how is this happening? The fact is, if we're going to make generalizations, the Chinese are among the best businessmen you can hope to find, right? Throughout the world, it's incredible what they get done. That being said, a supermarket must have permission to sell a number of items. If you want to sell cooking gas, you must get permission for petroleum products. If you want to sell alcohol, you must get a permission to sell alcohol, to display alcohol, tobacco, that kind of thing. They don't. The other thing that happens is that a supermarket usually, by virtue of its size of operations and rate of turnover, almost inevitably is large enough that it must register for VAT. They don't. So if you have a situation where supermarkets are coming up and are not honoring their social responsibilities, so they're not conforming to the building code, they're cutting corners to get planning permission so that they can build where they want to build, or they're ignoring it altogether. And then they are cutting corners in areas where other existing businesses are incurring expenses. Then you have a problem and you are undermining the established businesses. Because if I'm selling a bottle of water for $100 and you got to pay VAT, so you're selling it for $114, I lose. Nobody's going to be buying from me.
Right.
More than that, if you're paying for the license and if you're honoring safety precautions, so you got to buy fire hydrants and fire protection, this, and you got to arrange your building and incur the expense of meeting safety obligations and all of that. And you can't compete with me.
Right.
If you're not paying your staff PAYE and NIS,
fair,
you can't compete with me.
Right.
So part of the structure by which businesses are required to operate and by which they incur more expense, if those rules aren't applied evenly across the board, then the person who is evading the rules will be able to undercut his competitor and starve him out of business. Now, I am aware that the government has said that the large established supermarkets like Massey, their prices are too high and they're catering for foreigners and the cost of living is unacceptably high. And therefore there is this policy, which isn't a policy because it's not thought out, it's not holistically planned, and there's no cause and effect analysis, to allow smaller, what's seen as smaller, cheaper, more flexible and more mobile businesses to get into the game so that they can sell at lower prices. The thing is that when you do that, you are forgetting the obvious, that the Macy's and the survival supermarkets and the DSLs are paying taxes, they're paying rates and taxes for the property they're on, they are paying for their employees. And if you start to hurt them financially by turning a blind eye to the corner cutting methods of the smaller folk who think they're being clever, you're harming yourself and you're harming the country.
Okay. I want to go a little bit bigger here, and you know, I just want to make this clear to the audience. I know this is not a topic that everyone is affected by. This is the business community, and I actually want to expunge a little bit on just a little bit more expansion on what you explained as how the country will be hurt by this and how this will have lasting effects on everyone. Now, I think I'm personally in business myself. I'm a businessman here. And I think it's something that irks all of us local business people. And I say this because it goes for you, the employees out there, meaning the local employees as well. I think as the businesses, the local businesses and the local employees are all witnessing that foreign companies and foreign employees are getting much, much more benefits than we are locally. And when I say much, much more benefits, we can talk about the tax breaks, etc. But then we are also talking about what you just explained, the corner cutting that we can't do or else we're going to get in major trouble for it because we're scrutinized much more heavily, or the foreign employees that are coming in and getting a different type of benefit. A different type of benefit, not paying local taxes, not having to pay PAY, not having to pay NIS. And we're sitting here watching, and I mean this for I guess dramatic emphasis. We're watching our country get raped. We're watching us not benefit as much as we should be. And the foreigners coming and getting everything. So, much more than us, or benefiting more than us, if you will, or getting a competitive advantage, if you will. So I think the conversation has to be had of, we understand the problem here. I don't think anybody doesn't understand that the government has disguised the concept of we need foreign investment to grow into them picking and choosing who they want to be a part of this, of our economy, receiving benefits, as we saw with the Vice News, exposition. We saw all of that came out of that. And we realize now that, I'm sorry, some of us have realized, because definitely not all of us, that clearly the government doesn't have concern for the locals anymore. I say this very interestingly, Tim, because it's going to bring up a whole other conversation after we finish this. And that's about the government not needing money from us anymore, because that's what it's going to boil back down to.
Because I was waiting for you to finish to make this point, that those established organizations that are good corporate citizens, they pay corporation tax.
Right.
So they're paying you 35-40% of their income. As tax, it goes to the GRA, it goes to the consolidated fund. And as soon as you start cutting them off at the knees, you lose that. And I'm telling you, these new small supermarkets are not paying their honest pound of flesh as tax. So why is that no longer important? Because there's so much oil money that it actually doesn't matter. And if the large businesses are hurting, that doesn't translate to less revenue and harm for the government, because the government coffers are so flush with oil. That's not relevant. So there's this poor mindset, this short-term mindset, that if these small supermarkets can come in and sell cheaper, let them come in and sell cheaper, because those large established corporations obviously are overcharging the people, not taking into consideration the underlying cost in building that supermarket, in building that parking lot, and paying the rates and taxes and the drains and the staff and all of that, not thinking about that. And it's short term, and overall it's harmful.
Right. So how? I mean, we're gonna. I don't want to finish with the Chinese supermarkets and so on, because the next conversation, I
want to go to Main City Council and the pavement vendors. Actually, I'm hoping that we end up there.
Good.
An associated problem with them.
I want to get to the gold dealers as well and the gold miners at them. But first, I like the conversation of Tim. I've had these conversations recently, multiple conversations recently with people, and they've been telling me I can't just jump over the solutions, because in my view, it's clear as day, right? I don't know how else to tell. People are like, well, what's the solution then? Like what? And I thought it was obvious. There has to be control. First and foremost, they have to stop the corruption. They have to stop people being able to go in and pay to bypass the system and the bureaucracy that we all have to deal with. And then on top of that, we have to ensure, and I think this is a critical part for businesses and businessmen and even employees out there, is ensuring that our foreign counterparts are contributing to our society equally, at least equally. And the truth is, they should probably be more.
How do you ensure that?
Please.
Well, that's the big question, you see, because the fact of the matter is that the people in Guyana who have businesses who are operating, they are either too busy, or too close to the government, or too cloistered, or too afraid to criticize because of the contracts that they're getting to do anything about it. So they live in their bubble. But in the meantime, look around you. Just up the road from where you're living in your nice residential neighborhood, somebody's been putting up a supermarket, somebody's putting up a Chinese restaurant, somebody's putting up some kind of commercial or industrial plant, or somebody's setting up some stand on the parapet and opening a taxi service to block traffic. So unless you recognize your own social responsibility. If you try to turn a blind eye, this is going to come to haunt you. It's already coming to haunt you. So I think that this has to do with the mote in your own eye. Our middle class, our educated, our professionals, our academics, our businessmen, they and women, they have to understand that if you live in an area controlled by an NDC and the NDC does nothing when they see cheap supermarkets go up or cheap Chinese restaurants being opened or tire shops or vulcanizing shops and that kind of thing opening in residential areas.
Wash bay is this
right.
Absolutely.
When they see the social structure being undermining and the NDC does nothing, they can take steps in respect of that NDC. It's so easy to do, to put together a core of people and inform the NDC at the next local elections, we will be taking steps to remove you. Now, at another level, there needs to be a movement to decentralize power, and you hear me say this all the time.
All the time.
Because if you've got a Chinese restaurant or a Chinese supermarket or a wash bay opening in Eccles or opening in Victoria, that falls within the purview of the NDC in that area. And it is that NDC that should be sending out a stop notice, should be taking action. But when you go to those same NDCs, they are doing nothing at all because they are so in debt and so dependent on the central government for funds, for anything. That they're hamstrung. So we have to find a way to decentralize and to give them financial autonomy, financial independence. And once we do that, by a fair implementation of payment of rates in each of those areas, so they got their money, then they become directly answerable to the same people in Victoria, to the same people in Eccles. And the businessmen and women who live in those areas, who are directly interested and have a vested interest in their own standard of living, where they live in, and the businesses that they're operating, and don't want to see their established businesses undermined by folk who land on them, cut corners, don't pay staff, don't pay VAT, don't pay corporation tax, and therefore can undermine them competitively. When you're directly answerable there at the NDC level, then things can change.
Action. I love it. I love it. And you know, people, you want a solution? Decentralize the power. The issue that we're having right now is the government controls all the purse strings. The NDCs and RDCs, who should be the ones that are saying, nope, you can't open a supermarket, we're saturated in that. Nope, you can't open a wash bay. Nope, you can't open a restaurant here, we're saturated with that. The council that I am controlling, these areas have enough of those things. We're not allowing any more in order to make it sustainable and business to be competitive. The reality is, those, as Tim just explained, those NDCs and RDCs are being controlled by the central government because the central government controls their money. So without the money, without their funding, they're just useless people. They just sit down there and they wait to get a phone call from the central government that says, okay, don't let the supermarket open. But obviously the Chinese and the foreign companies paying the government, paying their bribes, getting through with anything they want. And then all the local businesses are suffering. I mean, all the little corner stores, for example. I mean, you saw those mom and pop shops, those little, bottom house shops that people have opened. All those locally are dying now because the Chinese opening up on every single corner. But when the RDC and NDC should be stepping in and saying, no, you're not allowed to open a convenience store here. You're not allowed to open a mini supermarket here because we already have 3 shops selling drinks and basic food necessities for households. But the power is not with the NDCs and RDCs, and we're watching the central government maintain control because they don't want anybody else to have power, and then their locals are getting screwed and nobody's doing anything because they're too scared to talk.
I could also like to point out that decentralization of power will also be an effective weapon against corruption. You see, if you got one entity that is the procurement arm, the approval of contracts through the government, so that any government awarded contract goes through this one entity, then it's one entity to be compromised, and you own Guyana.
Right.
But if the power is decentralized, so that if a road needs to be built up in Lusignan or a road needs to be built up in Maikoni, the NDC in that area is the entity responsible to build the road. Then instead of reading in the newspaper that the government says it's building this road in Rossville or it's repairing roads in Rumveld, which should be the responsibility of the main city council because this is within the city, or that they're building some road along a dam in Buxton because they want to show how inclusive they are, when that should be the responsibility of the NDC there.
Good.
Systemically, what we should have is that if a road is needed there, the NDC should be awarding the contract and overseeing the project to build that road. Yeah. The NDC should be the entity who decides that a road is needed in the first place, not the government, because the NDC is the entity that has a more immediate connection with the people and the needs of the people there. As soon as you have, instead of one entity awarding all the contracts, you have dozens of NDCs awarding contracts separately. It's very hard for the person who is going to a central location, central housing, to be able to say to the same person over and over, I'm compromising you, here's your grease, here's your top up, so that you can approve this permission or approve that permission, because it's one place you're going all the time. If when you build in your supermarket in Victoria, you got to go to the NDC there. You're building in Eccles, you got to go to the NDC there. Suddenly, you got to find a new corrupt person every single time because you are going to a different location. Decentralizing helps the system because each person appointed, they're not connected to each other. And you're much more at risk rather than if you have one friend in a central location where 100% of the contracts are being awarded. It's really important to decentralize. Yep.
You brought up an interesting conversation there about the, I'm trying to explain to people now the next step to decentralizing power. I think this has to be the natural flow of the conversation. People sit down there and they say, well, we talking about government processes here. We talking about changing law reform here. We talking about constitutional reform here, and people get lost, and I don't blame them. They don't understand it. So how break this down for me? How can what is the process? How do we now force the government to decentralize power? I want to go all the way down to why people understand we're saying these things, that we're not just coming up with the solutions and then there's nothing we can do. Well, that's a great idea, but it can't ever happen. How does it happen?
Interestingly, the system that the British left us, if we allowed it to work, would work. Let's talk about the problems we have in Georgetown, because Georgetown, of course, is the largest economic area in Guyana, largest population center, and gets flooding every time God spits. So, we flood because the drains are all blocked. The roads are in terrible shape. We say Mayan City Council should be fixing this, but they're not. They have no money. They're permanent lament. Corrupt as they are, they have no money and they're right. But let's talk about how it should work. Because you're right, people's eyes glaze over, but the fact is this isn't complicated. Money is very simple. Mr. Singh got his shop on Regent Street. And Mr. Singh is selling cloth. In his shop, he got to pay rates and taxes. And those rates and taxes should pay to clean his drain, to remove his rubbish. He pays light bill and he pays water rates, and his everything should be sorted out from the rates and taxes he pays, right? And those rates go to Main City Council, and Main City Council collects from Mr. Singh and all his neighbors, everybody who owns property, and it's fair because if you got a big house you pay more, if you got a small house you pay less. It's fair. Then Mr. Prasad comes and he drives up his car and he parks outside Mr. Singh's shop and he puts up a stall and he blocks the entrance to Mr. Singh and he hangs all his clothes on the pavement. He's not paying any rates.
Nothing.
He's not paying any electricity. He brings his rubbish and he leaves his rubbish, and if you don't believe me, look in any drain in Georgetown at 6 o'clock in the afternoon when the pavement vendors have gone. He's not paying for the removal of that. And therefore, the amount of rubbish, the amount of load on the system is doubled. But it's doubled by people who are not paying into the system. Further, Mr. Singh now in his shop, his customer base is gone. Because he is undercut by the man outside who is selling. And because he doesn't have any of those overheads,
he can sell for half the price.
Cheaper. He's selling out the back of his car, so he's blocking up traffic. So customers can't park and go into the shop. And because he is undercutting the owner of the shop loses profit, and we have a difficulty. I hear every time the topic comes up, people talk about poor people and these are poor people on the road trying to make a living and all of that. In the meantime, our roads are broken, our drains are broken, and the businessmen who are paying and should be paying to make the system work, to remove the rubbish, to pay for lights, to pay for water, to pay for drainage, and to fix the roads, they are being harmed and squeezed all the time.
No fair.
Now, if you can't see, if Guyanese can't see that there's only one solution to this, that we all have to accept our social responsibility, and we cannot allow the people who are legitimate businessmen to be squeezed by the hustlers out there who are cutting corners, then we have a large problem.
But you also, now you're adding in foreign companies coming in and competing again, cutting corners and competing. So the local businesses are being hit by the stall vendors, the ones that not paying taxes, and now they're being hit by the Chinese opening up on every corner and cutting their own corners and costs. So the local businesses cannot survive. It's impossible, right? They're competing against two groups of people here.
Harder and harder.
Right? Now, I want... Yeah, that's not exactly what I was getting at just now.
Exactly
I was getting at the political side of this. People need to understand that there is power in making changes politically in order to solve these problems. You have to explain that to the people, because they're sitting down there and saying, well, the two of y'all have great ideas, but how y'all could possibly implement that? Explain the political side of this on what needs to happen. How do you force the government to do this?
All right. Let us take away the government majority and the government control of parliament. So let's give the opposition the right, the power to pass some laws in parliament.
Okay, so we have a minority government.
Yes,
everybody went and everybody equally vote PPP, PNC, and ANUG. We got
like they should have done
AFC, everybody.
2015 2011 to 2015 when there was a majority opposition in parliament. Let us pretend that we're sitting in parliament and opposition can pass some laws. First thing you do, when government comes to say we're taking more money out of the natural resources fund that we got in New York, the opposition in parliament can say no. That's the first thing. Second thing, when government says mayor and city council are corrupt and we're not giving them any money, the opposition in parliament can say we are allocating a budget for mayor and city council. We are allocating a budget for the New Amsterdam, Linden, Bartica, Lethem, mayor and city council, so that they know how the wherewithal to spend on their own needs. As soon as you decentralize like that, when somebody with machinery wants a contract, he can go to any of those entities and bid for contracts. Now, all of those different entities that are awarding contracts, Linden, New Amsterdam, Springlands, Bartica, Pomeroon, wherever you want to go, Charity, wherever you want to go, if they're awarding their own contracts for drains, for roads, and that kind of thing, suddenly the government's role is much smaller, and the government's role needs to be small. And we then have the luxury to go and bid for contracts in all of those places. And nobody can monopolize corruption in that case. You then have a level playing field where the opportunities are there and the ambit of the scope of getting contracts is wider and available to all. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, we got the Public Procurement Act, where there's a system for awarding contracts. And the system for awarding contracts is you got a tender. So government says we want to build this road, gas to shore, drains, whatever it is. The act provides for tendering, but then the act has this shortcut. And the act says, look, if you got emergency, don't worry with that nice transparent process. You get 3 bidders. You could pick the bidders. You could go and call them. You identify the 3. And the lowest bid wins. Now, you would be amazed what percentage of contracts are awarded using that shortcut with 3 bidders that you call an emergency. We've spoken on this program about the emergency award of a contract for ID cards.
EID cards, correct. 50 million US.
A year later, you can't see them.
A year? This was 3 years ago. It's like the first contract they awarded.
But it was an emergency.
Yes, apparently not that severe of an emergency.
Right. So, what the opposition in Parliament can do is mandate that the body that is receiving these bids is run 2 people by government, 2 people by opposition, 1 person by the third party. So suddenly you got oversight by the opposition of the receipt of bids and the award of contracts. It's not in the hands of the government only. Both sides, both big parties are present when the decisions are being made. That solves a huge problem. The next thing you do is you have to go under any penalties. So I'm sure you've read in the papers, Empatab doesn't even answer.
Yeah.
Because there's no penalty.
Right.
Now, the legislation can be changed so that if a contract is awarded in violation of the procedure without just cause, somebody goes to jail.
Absolutely. All of a sudden now, the workers there that the government is called, they're not going under the bus for you anymore. So correct.
All you need to do is have enough Guyanese to decide that opposition has to control parliament. Not this big party, not that big party, but the third.
Yeah.
And the opposition-controlled parliament can pass laws that will, first of all, ensure both sides are in the room when the money is handed out. And that means the representatives of both sides, both large racial groups and all their paraphernalia will then have equal access. But more importantly, both sides will be able to scream murder if somebody on the other side tries to shortcut it.
Good. You know, I love the conversation. We want to get to something interesting that I know people will be much more interested in. You know, we talking about accountability and so forth. Yes, we need to decentralize, etc. You know, another thing that these businesses are competing against, which it has to be discussed, blackouts. Okay. Now, not only are everybody competing in an unfair environment and who is paying tax and who this and who that, we don't even have consistent electricity in the country right now. The blackouts are rampant. A friend of mine just said he had blackout for the last 24 hours in Eccles. Okay?
You know, can you talk about blackout? And that's important, but also water. But yeah, finish your thought with blackout.
No. You jump into it because we've reached a point now where anybody in this country, I'm sorry, that will sit here and still defend this government of being capable in any way, shape, or form for less than 1 million people. Call it 1 million just because we got nothing else to do.
Let's talk about the economics.
How? But the economics, the loss of income, how much we lose?
Every middle or upper income household in Guyana has had to spend money for some kind of battery backup system,
generator,
some kind of solar system, and some kind of generator. The amount of foreign exchange that has been used up, when you multiply it by the hundreds of households that have had to invest in solar panels, in generators, pay for gas, pay for batteries. Those batteries cost a couple $100,000 each.
Yeah.
Now translate that to water. I went to Paramaribo a couple of weeks ago. Not a black tank in the city. Not a black tank in the city. If you think each household in Guyana has to pay for a water tank or 2, has to pay for a water pump, has to pay for a pressure pump, has to filter the water, got to buy water filters to filter the water, and then has to repair it and pay for the electricity for the pump. Now, if you translate that into a pure economic cost, isn't it obvious that by paying half of that amount to an efficient and proper water service, you would get water, it would be clean, it would be reliable. By paying half of the generation costs and solar panel costs to an efficient electricity company, you would get efficient electricity, but they're not efficient. And then you got to ask the question, why aren't they efficient?
Right.
And the reason, again, is corruption. Centralization of power. Because at the end of the day, all of us need electricity. So you don't have a choice. You got to go here to buy the electricity. And therefore, it is a captive market. And I have experienced it over the last 20 years. The governments of the day, respectively, refuse to divest the generation of electricity to private generators to sell to GPL. They want to keep that power because that means I get to buy generators, I get to pay to maintain the generators, I get to pay my own people, that's personnel, to maintain those generators. I deal with the transmission system myself.
Not to mention I get to decide who pays electricity, full stop.
And I get to decide who gets the contracts for the supply of all of this generation equipment. Now, in every large city you go to, start with New York, Toronto, private generation companies supply electricity, and it is so easy to do, it becomes maths.
Yeah.
Look, if you need 100 kW of electricity, kilowatt hours of electricity. If that's what you need, you find 5 companies and you say to those companies, I need you to guarantee that you will always have available for me 30 kW. You guarantee that, and I will guarantee to you that I will always supply, I will always require, I will always buy a minimum of 15. So you have done the math, and therefore you know that of those 5, they guarantee and they're giving you 30. So you got 150 capacity, although you only need 100 capacity.
Right.
And if any one of them breaks down, you lean more on the others.
Right.
Because they know you are guaranteeing a minimum amount that you're buying, you can fix a price beforehand and bind everybody for the next 5 years. Guyanese will know how much they're paying for the electricity because it's stuck. The electricity will be reliable because if one breaks down, you got 4 others to lean on.
Yeah.
That's how it works everywhere else, not here. The reason it doesn't work like that here is because it would mean you would have to decentralize the purchase of the generators.
Good.
And our solution is a gas to shore project that is centralized, is already double over budget. And we are hearing these vacuous, vacant, idiotic promises that electricity will be cheaper.
Riddled with corruption, to the point where no private lending institute, or public for that matter, is lending the government of Guyana any money to develop the project. They've decided absolutely against it.
The same principle applies with the water.
Yeah.
And I want to say to Guyanese, Paramaribo, smaller than us, looks exactly like us.
Huge hydro plant. Jesus.
They do not have any black tanks or water pumps in the city.
Yeah.
They do not have generators in the city. They get a reliable supply of water, a reliable supply of electricity. What's the matter with us?
Yeah. I sit down here and I watch the comments here, and it's really sad. You got to, I appreciate the couple of people trying to respond, but all the PPP people try to do now is turn and say it's PNC fault. The minute you talk about anything, it's PNC fault, and it's just so dumb. Like, I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate all of you watching. You guys make me laugh every opportunity you get, because you're here watching and commenting, telling people not to listen to us. I don't know if you know how Facebook works or the algorithm, but the more you comment and the more you speak, is the more people do end up getting notified about us. But nonetheless, it's just sad, because the only thing that the PPP now have to lean on is they try to rig the election, and I mustn't go back there, because the conversation no longer is anything of substance when it comes to development or moving forward, etc. It's now, you just need to not vote for them and be scared of. Look, I want to talk about politics for 2 seconds.
But hold on here.
Go ahead.
They're right. I agree. They tried to rig the election.
Correct.
And you should stay far away from them.
Correct.
Because if there's a breakdown of democracy,
agreed,
whether they're good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent, you can't get them out of power.
Yep.
Because if they've taken away your vote, you will not get them out this election, next election, or forever. But improve that. I agree. But I don't know that means plan B is to go with the corrupt.
Yeah. Okay.
Plan B cannot be either the devil or the deep blue sea. There has to be another option. Right. And hopefully enough Guyanese will see that other option.
Let me talk
neither
about
of the two, neither the devil nor the deep blue sea, neither the pot nor the kettle controls parliament and government together.
Let's talk about, I want to talk a little bit about opinion. And I can say this clearly, okay? PNC is not a threat. Anybody out here that's scared of PNC needs to stop being scared of PNC. Grow up, take a walk down the road, ask anybody if they voted for PNC. Okay? PNC, APNU is not winning the election anytime soon. Okay? They're not winning in 2025, they're not winning in 2030, they're not winning in 2035. So if you're still scared of them, and PPP has instilled in you that you must be scared of PNC, then you have nothing to be scared of. You should be living a happy life. There is nothing to fear. Okay? So stop being so worried about PNC. Worry more about the issues that are currently ongoing under the current regime. They're not going to win the election. Stop being terrified of them. We need to now focus on how do we make things better with the PPP in government. Because I will be the first to say, I believe the PPP are going to win the 2025 election. Okay? I believe they're going to hold the executive office. But you know what I think is needed? You know what I am personally doing all of this for? Is that we need to hold them accountable. We need to ensure that they can't can't hire their brother to run GPL and give us our blackout whole day. We got to make sure that they give the NDCs and the RDCs their autonomy in order to make sure that local businesses are competitive. They need to not hire a board to run Guywa who just thief in everything. They just need to make sure that in Parliament and while running the country, they're held accountable and transparent. It's not that difficult. This is not rocket science. We need them to not be able to control Parliament so they can't thief all the money. So that somebody can say, you want more money from the Natural Resource Fund? Show me where the last set of money gone first. And that's all it is. It's not telling them to do their job. That will be completely up to the voters. But at the same time, we have to make sure when they're in there, they're not just thieving every single thing and screwing over businesses and giving their friends and family contracts. That's all this is. It's not rocket science. Little laws need to be changed. As we can tell, there's social ills all over the place. We're talking about road deaths on the road. We're talking about police corruption. Should we jump into this? Should we jump into police corruption?
That's a serious topic and a large one. It's also topical.
Yeah, we only got 10 minutes remaining, so tell me.
Well, I know everyone has read about the huge amounts of money that have been uncovered moving around in the police. Is their store, right? They've got a store that they can use, that they buy products. I think they buy products at low prices. And somebody tried to deposit a large amount of money there. I think we have some deep-seated issues in our police force. The connection between the police and the government is too close. As long as we have a situation where a minister can pick up a phone and call a senior police officer and get a result, that's problematic.
Or give a gun license. Go ahead.
And I think that needs a whole different show to discuss, because at the end of the day, there are some professionals there in the police force, but they're not proud of their uniform. And they need to be given an environment where they can turn up for work, proud of their uniform, proud that they're providing a service to the community, proud that they're defending and protecting the society. And I know that's not happening. You know, at the bottom level, we saw the other day, the Commissioner of Police talking about clamping down. They like to say clamping down on private vehicles using sirens and blue and red lights and that kind of thing, to say that it's being abused and it needs to stop and they're going to start arresting folk. But whether deliberately he turned a blind eye or whether he genuinely doesn't have his finger on the pulse, he misses the fact that police are among our worst drivers. There is not a driver in the police force, whether they're driving a truck or a motorbike or a car, that will respect a red light, that will respect a speed limit, that will stay in his lane. I have seen police vehicles get fed up at a red light, turn on the sirens, go through traffic through the red light, and then turn the sirens off at the other end. I've seen police vehicles turn their sirens on, blast through traffic to drop children to school. That kind of abuse is not acceptable, because what it does is it trains Guyanese drivers to ignore them. Now, solutions. In other places, the authorities put the equivalent of a black box in a plane into police vehicles, so that when the siren goes on, the central location, just like a taxi service has a central point, the central location is notified that this police vehicle has put on its siren. You then need to explain why you put on the siren, what the emergency is. Because a siren is for dangerous driving. It is to alert the people around you, I have to drive dangerously to jump through this red light to go and put out that fire. If you're doing it because you're late for work, you have no excuse and you should be charged for dangerous driving. I rather suspect that if we had that black box in each police vehicle and the obligation to report why I put on my siren and what the emergency was, first of all, the number of incidents would go down. And second of all,
respect for police would rise.
Respect for police would rise, but people would then be more prone to respect the sirens when they hear it. We talk about people breaking the law, we talk about road rage, we talk about deaths on the road. There are so many parts of that, so many variables that tie in together, but maybe that's the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The police force has to be. Enforcement has to be the starting point. The laws are there. The rules are there.
If you think how many police vehicles you see in accidents all over the place. You remember when Granger was president, the presidential guard got into an accident and killed somebody on the East Park.
I remember.
It's not acceptable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at some point in time, we have to start realizing that this is the accountability we're talking about. And this comes from the top down. This conversation started with the police. The police stealing money and the corruption going on in the police force, and then you work your way down. And the fact of the matter is, you can't. If you've got no accountability at the top, and you got corruption at the top, there's going to be corruption at the bottom. All right, these guys these guys got to survive as well. They sitting down. I tell you straight, they sit down at you. You get pulled over by the police now, and they just look at you and say, "Listen, partner, the truth is either I collect the money here, or you got in the station, and you can give my boss, and then I don't get no money. So you might as well give me now."
Well, I hope not.
That's what's happening. Because these guys, the poor ranks on the road are realizing, well, we just get in the scraps, right? And then they got to play a political game to get any kind of promotion. And you know there's a whole lot of game going on, and we know that is a big cause of what is occurring, all this story that has come to light. Because a lot of people in the police force have realized they're not getting promotion because they're not playing the politics. They are being professional. Now they're watching the politics, they're watching the ones that are being corrupt and helping politicians, and they've gotten the promotions. So guess what? The whole inside of the police force has crumbled, and all the story coming out now. And that's what has occurred. All right. Now, just before we finish, I'm going to say, it's so interesting because the next conversation we have to have, hopefully next week, is about the crime rate in the country and what that's stemming from. And what the first thing I'm going to tell everybody in the public is the first point you're going to have to make on that is it is not just about corruption. It is not just about the police force. You have to understand that social ills like addiction, like crime, like abuse, like murder, etc., first have to be looked at from an economic point of view. The fact of the matter is, we just saw military men get caught with a whole bunch of marijuana, and policemen recently as well. And so they're drug dealing now. They're moving drugs. Now, you have to sit down here and say, well, I can't believe they're doing this. They're supposed to be professional. These men get to pay $100,000 a month. What are you expecting them to do?
Yeah. They have to be proud of their uniform, and that means that kind of self-respect must turn on their income.
Yep.
Talking about crime, I heard Kemra Jamjatan say that they should implement the 2 a.m. curfew.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm so glad that the AFC seems to be revitalized and that one of our most charismatic leaders, Nigel, is leading the charge. But let me tell you, the key to any happy society is freedom. And for anybody to tell me, who usually in my bed home at night, that at 2 o'clock in the morning I can't decide that I'm getting up to go and take a drive somewhere. So he wants to curtail my freedom because he can't conceive of a better way to fight crime. He doesn't belong in the position.
Agreed.
My freedom is much more important to me. And I think before you say to an entire society that you're locking them up from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock every morning, I would really prefer to be free and let everybody take their chances on the road.
I hear you. I will say, I'm going to say this absolutely clearly. We are not for the 2 a.m. curfew as was upheld and dealt with by the APNU AFC regime. That was wrong. They did it. They implemented it wrong. I will say, though, what's interesting is having lived in Canada and the States and so on, they do stop serving alcohol at 2 a.m.
That doesn't mean you can't go out on the road.
No, well, exactly.
That's freedom.
That's freedom. So by all means, to understanding that there are certain controls when it comes to alcohol curfews, that they can find areas and ways to meet in the middle, because there have been studies on these things. This isn't just haphazard.
This is very true.
Right?
But you also have to find a connection, because the fact is, road rage in Guyana doesn't just happen at night.
Yeah.
People are not just getting killed on the road at night. It's happening in the daytime with the large trucks that are driving back and forth on the east bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's happening at rush hour when people are swinging in and out of traffic because the traffic isn't well maintained and monitored.
Yeah.
To try to pretend there's some correlation to a 2 o'clock curfew to people getting killed on the road is stupidity. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it.
Agreed.
And if that's the best you can do, you should have stayed home and shut up.
Yes, absolutely. I think we both completely agree with that. On that point, we are definitely done here, guys. Tim, we have lots more next week. I know there are some topics we didn't even get to cover, but next week we're going to be hopefully have you back on to discuss a few more interesting revelations. Because like I brought up, we haven't spoken about, apparently there's a new investigation going on about gold smuggling again with different personnel that the FBI are apparently investigating. So it's so interesting because we're watching these traditional sectors, have all of these issues now all of a sudden. And I'm going to quickly say this for everyone out there. I find it interesting that the government is not stepping in or getting involved in any way, shape, or form to the point of almost throwing people under the bus. And I'm going to lead that back to they don't need the people anymore. They don't care about the businesses. They don't care about the citizens.
Oil money is there.
They got money from oil now. They don't need us anymore. So they don't care about which FBI investigating you. They don't care about which Chinese businesses coming to damage you. They don't care anymore. Yep. That's all I can lead to.
In fact, the oil money is so nice that they even forgot their election campaign discussion about renegotiation. Whether you agree with renegotiation or not, if you made a promise, the least you could do is explain why you didn't keep your promise.
There you go. All right, guys. On that note, thank you for joining us. We'll be back here next week. As usual, my name is Kian Jabour. Thank you, Timothy Jonas, for being here on Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. We will see you all next week. Be careful on the roads. Take care.